our discussion today about addiction and substance use and substance abuse, I think it's helpful to define a few terms. So let's start with that. Substance use, which is taking a substance for a desired purpose. Your morning coffee is an excellent example of substance use. A substance use disorder, which is a psychiatric diagnosis, means, among other things, that a person's substance use is to a point where they're having subjective distress about it, or they're having some objective kind of problem because of that use and can't stop. Addiction, we think of as a chronic brain disease. Okay? It's a disease that hits specific parts of the brain around reward and motivation, memory, and related circuitry. You're going to be hearing a lot more about science later in our panel here. But from the outside, what addiction looks like, instead of on scans and on autopsy, on the outside it looks like people lose control of their drug use. And then they've lost control of their lives because of their drug use. That's how we see addiction on the outside. So what puts people at risk for addiction? I'm starting very high level. We're going to end up at the most granular scientific information that you'd want. About half of the risk, up to half of the risk, is genetic. Okay, people have a biological predisposition toward an addictive disease. But they're not going to develop that addictive disease unless their brain is exposed to the substance. Okay, so we know that the younger the brain at the first exposure, the higher the risk of addiction. Repeated exposures of the brain to a substance increases the risk of addiction. And the use of one drug increases the risk of use of and addiction to other drugs. Kind of makes sense, right? Thank you for nodding. I like to make sense. One of my many quirks. Okay, so what contributes to people choosing to put their brain at risk and use the substance? What contributes to them exposing their brain? Well, the higher availability of a substance increases its risk of use. The use of one drug, again, will increase the risk of use of another. And then the lower the perception of the risk of that use, the higher the risk of use. So we saw this with opioids, right? Opioids are safe. Doctors prescribe them. We see this with ODE cigarettes, the Juul products for the youth, right? Oh, they're safe. Okay? They're safe. They're accessible. They deliver a drug at a young age. All of these things we know predispose to the development of addiction. So is cannabis addicting? Here's an easy one. Yes. Yes. Very similar to other recreational drugs. Nicotine and alcohol. Do we ask if those things are addicting? And we know they are. Very similar to prescribed drugs like opioid analgesics, or pain medicines, or sedatives. We know that these substances are addicting. The key is that most people who use these substances don't develop addiction. That doesn't mean the substance isn't addicting. Right? Very key. But far too many people who use these substances become addicted. And even those who are not addicted, far too many of them suffer adverse effects of their drug use. So when we think about cannabis, we think, are there positive health impacts of this? Like with opioid analgesics, there are positives when we use opioids at times, or are there only negative? Like alcohol, there is no safe level, there is no healthy level of alcohol use. Or smoking, nicotine. 1 in every 20 cancers in this country are related to alcohol intake. More people die from nicotine, from smoking, and more people die from alcohol independently than die from opioids. So simply because most people who use don't get addicted does not mean a substance is not addicting, and it doesn't mean that there aren't substantial, tremendous health impacts from the legal and prescribed drugs we have. Okay, how prevalent is this? 1 in 11 Americans 12 or older used cannabis in the past month. Think about that. That means from 13-year-olds to 93-year-olds, 1 in 11 used cannabis in the past month. Only 1 out of 67 Americans have a cannabis use disorder only. That makes us about 4 million people who have a problem with cannabis. Okay, how are we going to deal with preventing opioid addiction? Well, we can't change your genetics. We can work to educate and ensure the following. Increase the age of the brain at the time of first exposure. Decrease repeated brain exposures. Decrease the use of all drugs. Decrease the availability of the substance, any substance, and educate on the true risks of all drug use. This means opioids, and this means cannabis. So let's talk about medication. Okay, what is a medication? Well, in the United States Food and Drug Administration is responsible to ensure the safety and efficacy. Does it work? Is it safe? Let's look at the risk-benefit analysis. When determining which substances are allowed to be marketed as medications. Now, we have 3 medications that are FDA approved to treat opioid use disorder. 3, only 3. We have methadone, buprenorphine, and naltrexone. We have rescue medication for overdose, which is naloxone. We have a medication that's approved for withdrawal, lofexidine. But we have 3 medications that are FDA approved. Risk-benefit analysis are very clear on these 3 medications to treat opioid use disorder. And how do they make that risk-benefit analysis? Well, the FDA ensures that we highlight the risks, we highlight the side effects. Their medications are tested. There's a consistency in FDA-approved medication products. That consistency is out there for quality assurance. You've heard about drug recalls, medication recalls, right? This is part of our FDA process of ensuring safety of our medication supply. And there's post-marketing surveillance that happens after a medication comes to market to ensure safety continues. As risks, as side effects become noted, that those are monitored. This is part of what a medication is in the U.S. But we've taken a very different approach to cannabis in this country. Cannabis is not held to the same standards as medications. 2 exceptions, and Dr. Sadet mentioned one, Epidiolex, and the other is Marinol. Those are FDA-approved products that came from cannabis, and they go through that process. But otherwise, there is no medical marijuana. We don't smoke medications in this country, and we don't eat them in foodstuffs. That process of medication safety and effectiveness we've gone through for 2 and only 2 products related to cannabis. And then in terms of recreational drug use, we don't hold cannabis to the same standards as nicotine or alcohol in this country, even in the states that have determined that they will make cannabis legal. So if, for alcohol, you can tell how much alcohol is within any product. We're very clear that these substances of nicotine and alcohol should not be marketed to youth, etc. We're not holding cannabis to this same standard. Okay. So we do have 3 medications, and you'll hear about this a bit later as well, that are FDA approved to treat opioid use disorder. These medications have been proven to do a couple things. First of all, save lives. People who are on, we've got substantial data, who are on these medications have half of the risk of dying from their opioid addiction while they're taking those medications as people who don't take the medications. Clear data that these medications are keeping people alive. We know that they're clinically effective. We know that they're cost effective. Okay? And doctors, we understand the risks and benefits of these medications. We can look at the studies that were done and determine, I'm not choosing methadone because this person has a lengthening of their, how long it takes the electrical impulse to go through the heart. We know through the FDA process what side effects and risks are, and so we can manage these appropriately. We're not using these medications in this country. Most treatment programs in the U.S. do not utilize these medications. In fact, only about 40% of the treatment programs in this country are utilizing these medications that have been proven to help, proven to be effective and safe treatment. So why do we look at unproven, untried, addictive substances like cannabis when we can simply focus on increasing access to what we know works for treatment? As we go forward, let's do the simple thing. Let's look at the data. Let's not look at one or two cases. Let's not look at anecdotal data. We have a panel of scientists here. Look at what works. Look at how we treat every medicine, how we treat every recreational drug, and do that with cannabis. The simple answer to a complex problem is never going to be appropriate. It will always have adverse consequences. And cannabis is not the answer to our opioid epidemic.